Hello, everybody! I'm Ramses.
And I'm the Vespor.
And we're here for our season-ending Retroception for our 4th season 2D fighting Retrospective. That's right, where we take a look back at all 12 games that we did for this season's Retrospective.
That's right. We hope that you'll want to try some of these games after hearing our reviews on some of them. And then for others, we hope that you stay as far away from them as humanly possible.
Yes, the idea was to try to find 12 memorable games, and we never once said these are like the best games ever. We did pick some very classic and memorable games, but then we threw in some games that you would see in the store that you rented a lot, games that are memorable for different reasons, games that just were out there and you wonder, gee, what about this game? We didn't pick any horrible games, we really didn't. There's plenty. We could have done a whole retrospective on the 12 worst fighting games of our generation, but no, we just picked respectable games. Some are classics and some aren't, and we're just going to give you our final thoughts on the 12 we picked. I think this was a nice way to show a retro view on some of the fighting games that were out there during our retro period that we cover here on Vesper's Retro Reviews. So before we start, of course, let's remind you
to like, comment, subscribe, and
ring that bell, and we'll bring you a lot more. We have another retrospective coming for season 5 already. Yep. Now let's sit back, relax, and go back through all 12 games, and we'll give you our thoughts. So once again, and we started with game number 1, which was Marvel vs. Capcom 2. That's right, the follow-up to the amazing game that combined Marvel characters taking on Capcom fighters. What an amazing game. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 took it to a whole nother level. Why? Because every single character from all the Marvel-based fighting games from Capcom were brought together into this game, plus even more characters on top of that. So if it appeared in X-Men, Children of the Atom, all the way up to Marvel vs. Capcom 1, that character was reintroduced into this very game right here.
And it also showed that all the Street Fighter heroes were the equivalent of like the Hulk and Doctor Doom and all of them.
Yes, if you ever want to see Ken beat up the Hulk, well, now's your chance in this game and more. So why is this such a good game? Because it's like a fanboy's dream, this game. 3-on-3, and you can keep switching them out to your desire. Do all the super moves you can think of, team-ups, classic combos, chains, air throws, everything you can think of, and it's flashy, the music's hot, the graphics are great, so the voice actors from all the Marvel characters are exactly the same. It is an amazing, amazing game. This is one of those games you remember playing in the arcade. It's like, oh my god, this is so amazing, and it was fun. The lines were around the block to play this, and then eventually we got to play it at home on the PS2 and Dreamcast, which is amazing.
This was also one of the games where the tag teaming in and out and the super moves started to get to what we see today in these types of games. This was really the first real modern tag team fighting game where you had more than just one thing you could do. It was actually a very much so a good step ahead in the right direction and was incredibly fun because you got to play with all your favorite characters from both franchises.
For this gameplay, Ramses did the gameplay. It was Iceman, Gambit, and Captain Commando. Why did I pick those? Just because it's a fun combination. I picked pretty much 2 X-Men and a Capcom mascot here, and we always made jokes about Captain Commando in our earlier years, so I just thought it was fitting. And Gambit and Iceman are very reminiscent of the 90s X-Men show. Even though Iceman wasn't really in it, it has the same feel of characters from that show. So that's why I went with that team. And it was fun. The real kick to this game is the tag teaming in and out, as Vester said. That's the real catch to this game. Without that, it would just be like a basic fighting game. But that you can chain combos and just keep bringing people in and out. And it's pretty much just whittle down the opponent's energy. Vesper, what did we wind up giving this when all was said and done?
Well, we gave that a 4.5 stars because of the reasons I said earlier. This is the first real modern tag team fighting game that got everything right. This is how a tag fighting game should be.
And why did we start with this one? Just because we wanted to start with a bang. You know, the games aren't going to get much better than this because we're showing a wide variety of games, as you might or might not remember, like looking through our retrospective. So where did we go to for number 2 after this?
Well, after that, we go into another legendary fighting game, and that would be Killer Instinct, the original, not the second one, not the one they redid for the Xbox. No, the original arcade Killer Instinct.
That's right, and I think that was a nice next step. What was Nintendo and Rare up to? Yeah, it's an amazing team up. Not a Marvel vs. Capcom. This is a Street Fighter / Mortal Kombat combination because it has a lot of aspects from both. It's mostly a Street Fighter game where your characters can do just unlimited combos. That's the catch of the game. And it's not an easy game, as you can see from my playthrough. So here, I played this one again, and I used to be very good at it. I was more versed on the Super Nintendo version than the arcade, so playing the arcade version definitely was a challenge. I used Cinder for this playthrough, and he's probably not a character that people like to use, but I thought he was simple enough. He did that spinning kick and the flames that he threw a lot.
And the thing about this game that was unique was the combo system, but there was a problem with the combo system. The best characters in the games were the ones where you could actually do the combos because it was just a continual set, and you had to time it with some of them, especially Saberwolf, which was my favorite character. Some of these were absolutely insane to do, so of course, what becomes the most favorite characters? The ones that can easily do combos.
Yeah, I always do Cinder, Full Gore, Django, and Combo. Those are the ones where you can just keep chaining things together. And then you get tougher characters like Thunder and Saberwolf and Spinal. I mean, you can master anyone in this game, but if you are like a Street Fighter, you're going to pick some of the more iconic, similar to Street Fighter type characters, and they have plenty of it. But it's not just the moves that this game is well known for. This is like a 3D, let's show off our 64-bit effects here. They have stages that spin, they have impressive background. The music soundtrack is also very, very impressive. I mean, we were marveling about how amazing the soundtrack in this game is. And the joke of this game is they were going to release it for the Ultra 64. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, especially on this stage here, you can actually see the advertisement in the background where it says Ultra 64.
But the game's amazing, it's just very cheap. You have to get very good at these combos, otherwise you're dead meat. And I was not good at these combos because, like I said, I was very good on the Super Nintendo, but the arcade's a totally different animal. We got through it, but it was not easy. Now, getting to the boss, I think, is the biggest notice of our playthrough, Vespor, wouldn't you say? This was the big deal of our playthrough when we finally got to Idol.
Yeah, we forgot the one rule about when facing Idol, which is absolutely the stupidest thing. You literally can tap one button and beat Idol.
It took a lot of attempts, and I'm trying all these combos, I'm trying all these moves, and then I'm like, oh, that's it. I don't care anymore, and I just started doing like the medium kick or the high kick. And it just kept hitting and hitting, and that was it. I was like, oh, all right, well, that's what I'm going to do. And sure enough, that's how Idol went down.
And sad thing is that I can remember when he was doing this, I'm like, man, I remember back in the day, it was just, there was something cheesy you could do to beat him, and I forgot it was literally just hit like medium kick.
Yeah, I mean, that was it. So why did we put this in the retrospective? Because I think it was cool that Nintendo, of all companies, tried to get in on the whole fighting craze. And it worked out. I'm not a huge Killer Instinct fan, but we'll tell you in a second what we gave this. But I do like that Nintendo and Rare put their own spin on the whole fighting genre. And I think they did an impressive looking game. They added their own little elements to it. They even had fatalities where you can actually kill the other opponent if you did the right combination, so that was very Mortal Kombat-like. It was fun. You feel like you're playing like a really advanced game, but I'm still a Street Fighter fan. You know, I think this is still a step below Street Fighter. People with the best memory who get to do well in these games.
Or who practice them the most.
Right.
For this game, we gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars because at this time, no fighting game had been based on combos, and it was a very much so a legendary game when it came out.
Now it's game number 3. Clay fighter, hit 'em, back 'em, they don't care.
I'm going to punch you.
Oh, yes, I remember that theme, and Vespor hated that I kept playing it. Yes, and we picked this because this is the game that everybody in the Blockbuster or in your local video store saw sitting there on their shelf, and you're like, oh, Clay Fighter. Well, all right, that sounds interesting. What is that? Oh, it's a spoofy type of fighting game. Well, that sounds like fun for a weekend rental. And we picked the tournament edition because this was sort of exclusive to Blockbuster. So you're like, oh, you played Clay Fighter. No, now the tournament edition adds a few extra features. So we figured, hey, we might as well just show the exclusive one. It's really the same game, though, so it's not like you're getting any extra. And the game's what you would expect. It looks silly, it acts silly, it has a dumb storyline, something about how a clay meteor hits some carnival, then everything turns into clay suddenly.
But the thing about the game is that fighters were actually clay because this was stop motion photography, a very simple Street Fighter based fighting system with a very few moves. So this was just basically a simple Street Fighter clone done with clay. And as you can see here, if you beat them, they sort of just fell apart.
It's just tongue-in-cheek humor, you know. I use Ichabod Clay, that's right, the pumpkin guy, and he's not the famous one. You have Taffy and the Blob. Those are like the well-known characters in this game. And believe it or not, the series went on for a little while. So they had a second one, and then they had one on the N64, and that was it. The series was never really super popular, but it was one of those everyone played because it was a rental and you wanted another fighting game that you didn't want to buy, but you still wanted a game you could beat over the weekend. And this is very beatable. Even on regular level, which we play this game was not difficult at all. All the moves are very simplistic. It's a very, very straight Street Fighter clone. I like that they got this onto the Super Nintendo. I think it's very impressive. I like what they were going for. Is the game good? Well, we'll get to our final review in a second. Is it memorable? Yes. So I do think this belongs. So you have to see what other companies were doing. Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, these are so popular, these games, that everyone wanted to get in on it. I don't know if everyone understands how popular fighting games were and that everyone wanted to get their hand in that fighting game pocket. And so few do it. But this game's not bad. It's just, it does not stand out at all, except for the fact that it's clay characters fighting clay characters. I mean, that's the only catch to the whole game.
Therefore, a bit in the 90s, digitization was very popular, and so was stop motion fighting. And this was an example of this, and it was unique. It was different from what we had, like with the digitization of the characters with Mortal Kombat. It was fun. It was a weekend rental. It was different. And this led to us giving it a wonderful rating of a 2.5 stars. It was generic as could be. You played it, you beat it over the weekend, you said, well, I beat the game. Now onward to something much better. And for number 4, we did Mortal Kombat, which I would say for its day and age was absolutely the most popular fighting game to ever come out. On September 13th, 1993, when they released it to Super Nintendo, Genesis, Game Boy, and Game Gear, it was Mortal Monday, and let me tell you what, the hype only grew from there, folks. And this was the first time that a digitized game actually was successful, because there was many before and many after it, and none was as successful as the original Mortal Kombat.
That's right. This was very special. You know, people don't realize you had fighters that looked realistic because they took real actors and they digitized them into the game. They did fatalities, and Vespor was able to do it. He was the one playing this one. He's a better Mortal Kombat player than me. And he used Scorpion. He was able to do it. The guy would open his hood and a flame would come out and the guy would disintegrate right in front of you. You had other characters that would grab your heart right out of your chest. Another that would rip your head right off. I mean, this was amazing that they did this in a video game, because everyone was so like, oh, the violence in video games. Oh, this is terrible. This is terrible. Midway was like, all right, yeah, you're right. This is terrible. And we're going to make a game out of it that everyone's going to love. And it was cryptic. That was what everyone loved about Mortal Kombat. You did not know how to do these moves until you found out. Either your friend saw it in a magazine or someone figured something out. Now everyone in the world who's played Mortal Kombat can do the fatalities and understands the game. But you have to go back to 1992 and realize, wow, how did they do this? And it is amazing. It really is, when you look back at it, that they had these real actors doing deadly attack moves on each other. And it had this very old school kung fu movie type feel and vibe to it. You're in some tournament, you're in another world, you're fighting humans and creatures with powers, and it's all building up to something. What an amazing storyline. I'm not a big Mortal Kombat fan, boo his Ranzes, but I do appreciate what this game did. I really do.
What really sold it was the fatalities, because the movesets were very, very generic except for their special moves. It was all about the killing, and it was all about the digitization of the characters. A gimmick sold this game, and eventually they turned it into one of the greatest fighting game franchises ever.
Yeah, it's still going strong to this day. I mean, everyone's like, Street Fighter, Street Fighter. Yeah, you know, Mortal Kombat is still on the market and still just as popular. Mortal Kombat belonged on our Fighting Retrospective. Some games should have been on there that we didn't, but we only had 12 slots and we were very selective what we went with.
And some of those games also had a much higher learning curve than we wanted to remember.
Right, we're just doing a quick review. We're not reinventing the wheel here. So Mortal Kombat, one amazing game. I think we said everything that has to be said about it. It's great. But is it the greatest fighting game ever? Well, according to our final review, no, it is not. We gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and I think that's fair. Mortal Kombat 1 is amazing for different reasons. It's not the greatest fighting game. Everyone has kicks and punches, and that's really it. Impressive fatalities. It has a great soundtrack. It's very unique what they did, but that doesn't make it a great fighting game. But this belongs on the Retrospective. What an amazing game that started something that, again, is still going to this day, and I think everyone remembers that moment where they tried to do the fatality either at home or in the arcade, and how impressive it was when everyone was doing all the fatalities and owning the game. Yeah, it really was revolutionary.
Now let's move on to our next retrospective, which is number 5 for Street Fighter Alpha 3, the arcade version. This game is considered to be one of the best of all the Street Fighter games, and it was actually a prequel, believe it or not, folks.
Yes, a third of a prequel. Capcom had this weird where they were doing all these trilogies of games for a long time there. It was 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and before they got to 3, they were doing like layers upon the games in between it, so it got really crazy. You had Alpha, Alpha 2, and then finally Alpha 3, and Alpha 3 is like, forget it, we're just going to put every single Street Fighter 2 character in here. No more pretending that we're even taking place in the past. And if you get it on the console, we'll even throw in Guile and, Balrog is playable and all this stuff. I mean, they just went crazy with it after a while. But the arcade is really what it was meant for. A lot of people don't realize this was meant to be an arcade game, because it did better, believe it or not, in the console versions. When it came out on the PlayStation 1, that's when the game became super popular. I own this PlayStation 1. I still have it to this day, the version of that, and I loved it. I was in love with Street Fighter Alpha 3, and rightfully so. The soundtrack is just so fit for the late 90s. It has this very weird techno vibe to it. The fighting style is very Street Fighter, but the art style is very anime-like. It was a very stylized look to the game. And this is all supposed to take place in the past, which is crazy to me. And it's sort of funny how they try to mix Alpha into Street Fighter 1, leading to Street Fighter 2. Prequels are always very weird because it's not going to make any sense. The thing to know about this game is that every single one of these characters has a storyline, and that's the cool thing about this. Not every fighting game has that. They'll have just a simple ending and that's it. This has every single character has some weird confrontation with Bison at the end of the game, and they all have a very, very different storyline when that happens.
Ramsey's used Chun-Li, and in Street Fighter, every fighter does a different high kick, medium kick, or a low kick. And that adds a great deal of depth and options for a fighting game that Mortal Kombat did not have.
The weird thing with this game is that everyone has a weird storyline. You get to the 5th battle and the 8th battle or 9th battle, and then there's storylines, and you're like, oh, well, let's see why this character's fighting. So Chun-Li's looking for Bison, because Bison's doing illegal actions, asking Birdie, what do you know about it? And Birdie's like, I'm not telling, and then they fight. And that's really always what the storyline is. You go to the 5th battle, and it's, hey, I want to know about, well, you'll have to fight me for it. And of course, if you're player 1, you're always supposed to win, and that's it, and you move on to the rest. So it was cool how they tried to throw a storyline. And this is really Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, because they add in that power bar where you get to do all these super moves. Not just your regular super moves, but the super ultra moves. And they have finishers. It really is just so much fun, whether you play as one player against someone else. We could have picked any of the Street Fighter games. We knew we were going with Street Fighter. We already put Street Fighter 2 as a regular game plays. Street Fighter 1 we weren't going near. And we have another Street Fighter actually that shows up, but that's such a different game. This was the one we wanted to go with. Let's show what was one of the best Street Fighter games that's not Street Fighter 2. Is pretty much the way we went about it.
And this is also confirmed the final fight and Street Fighter being in the same world, because Cody's in this.
This one really confirms it, because we have all the Final Fight characters except for Hagar, but he's in a wrestling game that we might look at one day. So yeah, what an amazing game, and I think it's going to come as no surprise to anyone that we really praised and love this game. And I think we gave this the highest ranking you can give us.
We believe that all fighting games should be compared to this game. A 5 out of 5. It had everything you could want, and even though it doesn't have killing in it, it has combos, and they would just use this format to make many other great Street Fighter games after this.
To this day, when you see Street Fighter Alpha 3, you're going to pick it up and say, yes, I want to play Street Fighter Alpha 3. That's how you know you have a 5-star game, easily. And the next game on our list, number 6, is just as memorable. It is Primal Rage. That's Atari's attempt to get in on the fighting game genre.
This was yet another claymation type game, but it was memorable for not just being claymation, but being dinosaurs and eating people.
Yeah, that's pretty much what this game is, but the controls and moves are very awkward. That's the downside of this. They came up with a 4-button system that I was not a fan of, by the way, but I had to play this using Diablo, and I beat the game, and I was able to do it, and I was able to hold my own. One of those weird games where you gotta hold down a button, move the controller, release the button, do awkward situations over and over. I could get the fireball off well, but then you gotta do all this other stuff to get the combos. And then they had all the worshippers around. That was sort of the catch to the game, that I think there was 7 gods, and each one of them have color-coded worshippers. So if they're wearing red, they're worshiping Diablo. If they're wearing yellow, they're worshiping Chaos, and so on and so on. Earth is destroyed. It's now called Earth with a U, and all that's left are these people that worship these giant monsters who are fighting for supremacy, and that's the whole storyline. The catch to this game is that you have to beat everyone up, and then in the last battle, you gotta beat everyone up again, by the way, in a row. So I don't know. I didn't love the game, but I like the idea of it. I like when they do something different. Monsters fighting, it was unique, but I think the controls is what hurt this game.
That's right. This game had terrible controls. It fell back into something the Midway did with a lot of its games.
You can get used to anything after a while, but that doesn't make a game more fun. And I think this game's on a list just because I think everyone remembered this. Everyone rented it, everyone talked about it, everyone knew about it, but no one was like, wow, this is amazing. They were going to make a sequel, and we mentioned this in our review too, but it didn't happen. It had a little following, and they were trying to push it on all the consoles, and they did, but it just was not Mortal Kombat. They tried very hard. It just did not reach that level. They even tried to put in in gross humor. They had one of the characters passing gas a lot. There's a lot of crude jokes in this, but you still have to appreciate what it was. Is it average? Almost. What do we want to give this?
We gave this 3 out of 5 because it was not a terrible game. It's just, it was better than average because we still remember it. I still remember playing this to death. It was fun and I love this game. It just was limited. Given enough time, you can do anything, but this game was not worth that time and effort.
Now, a game that's also memorable, but probably is not okay for what it is our number 7 game, Justice League Task Force, and we played the Super Nintendo version. It's pretty much pick all the famous Justice League DC heroes and then fight all the other ones for reasons that they're evil clones or something. I don't know, the storyline's very weird. But we picked this because this is another one like Clay Fighter. You see in the story like, oh my god, DC Street Fighter, this is great, I gotta get this. And you rent it and you play it and you realize, wow, what a rush to market game this is. And they were trying to get in on the whole fighting thing. Oh, that whole old gag again. Yeah, that's pretty much what this game is.
Now, this game had plenty of moves involved in it, but I do want to point out that these moves were not easy to pull off. And when you play against the computer, they can do everything flawlessly, and you're like, oh my god, this looks like it's a fun game when you watch the demo. And then when you play it, you're like, this is not a fun game because you can only do like 1 or 2 of the moves. And it's just really generic because there's been many after this and they did them a lot better than this.
Yeah, you thought, oh wow, I'm gonna be Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, all the great DC heroes. And of course here I choose Flash. Why? Because his moves were easier to do than some of the others. So unless you wanted a game where I'm struggling to get all the moves off, or do you want a game where we can be completionists and play it? So I picked the Flash. But do you really feel like you're using Flash? No, not at any time do I feel like I am using Flash, because Flash would not be standing still for a moment in any of these fights. He'd be running circles all around everybody and doing all these crazy moves. You definitely don't feel that. And then you got all the mullet-wearing heroes, because this was the mid-90s when everyone had a mullet, including Superman, Aquaman, and even Wonder Woman has the locks all over the place. But the game is just so average. It's like you can see they're trying to build a Street Fighter clone very, very obviously, and it's failing because the moves suck. It's another game where the hit control is terrible, the moves don't always work. You have to be almost pixel perfect on the hits, and you have to be almost perfectly accurate on the controller to get these moves to fly off.
And you're wanting that experience where you can just mash super moves out, have some fun with it, but if you do not do it just right, it was absolutely impossible. And that was honestly the biggest downfall of this, and what kept us from giving it a much better rating at the end. The music was just fine, nothing real memorable.
Yeah, it was alright. It has that dum-da-da-dum, we're superhero music, but generic. But the graphics are pretty good. You're in different locations for each fighter, and I like that. With Aquaman, you're on the ground. With Superman, you're at the Daily Planet. Flash, you're on a desert road somewhere. Wonder Woman, you're on her island. How they got on her island, I guess we'll never understand how that worked out. But you have to also remember the storyline is ridiculous. Storyline in this game is they are all robotic clones built by Darkseid. And there's a plot to take over some energy source or something, and somehow the infiltrated the Justice League, except for the one hero you're using, that's the only one left, and the hero you're using is always like, I don't understand, why did insert name here attack me? I better go to the next one and find out. And then the storyline again is, I don't understand, that one attacked me too, what is going on? I better find out and go to the next one. That was the storyline of this game, and you'd think after 2 or 3 times happening, the hero you're using would realize something's up and what's going on. And then you go to Cheetah, of all characters. Cheetah, tell me who's behind this. Like, why Cheetah? What does she have to do with anything?
Darkseid would not do anything with Cheetah because she's really actually quite lame as a supervillain.
You fight Darkseid, which is a tough fight, but nothing too difficult. And then you get a really ridiculous ending that makes you wonder, was this all worth it? And the answer is no, it was not. And that's why we wound up giving it 2.5 stars. Yeah, very middle of the road, very average.
And you also had to play it at a certain difficulty to get the best ending.
The ending's not even that good. We beat it on regular, and the ending's pretty much all the superheroes just standing there. You did it, the end. So you don't even get that ending unless you beat this on one of the harder difficulties. That's how ridiculous this game is. And we should have known better because it's an acclaimed game, so what do you expect? So for number 8, we went to Darkstalkers. Which Darkstalkers? Darkstalkers 3, the 1998 version of Darkstalkers, pretty much a monster game. You take all the famous monsters from years past. You have a Frankenstein, a Dracula, a succubus, a mummy, a merman. You take all of them, you put it in one game, and you have monsters fighting each other, and that's what Darkstalkers is. And it's a good game. It's actually a lot of fun. It's Street Fighter with monsters. That's all it really is.
It had some good combo elements to it, simple ones, but they were very effective. The thing that this game was most known for was, of course, juggling, and you had to be very careful about it, but even then, it still gave you outs to some of the juggling.
Yeah, this had different supers too. You had the regular supers, you had the ultra supers, and you had the cancels. So they really tried to add more elements to this. So I used Morgan. I'm gonna say it was my favorite character because it's pretty much Ryu as a Darkstalkers character.
My favorite character was Alicia and John Talbane, like Werecat and the Werewolf, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, it is cool when they put creatures like that into this. So the game looks really impressive. If you played the first two Darkstalkers, you're gonna fit right into this one. This is similar to their other Capcom games. When they get to the third one, every previous character is now put into this game plus new, and that's where Capcom was great. They used to do that all the time. Problem with this game is though it's very limiting and very short feeling. You know, you beat 7 of the characters and then you get like a boss fight and that's really it. It just feels like it was missing a storyline. I think that was the problem that we had with this. It just felt like it was not complete enough. It felt very demo-like they're just gonna throw in all these fights and then that's it and you're done with it and there's nothing more to the game.
The boss fight at the end with the baby in what looked like a giant womb was actually very memorable.
When you fight Anakaris, you're in the Egyptian desert. You have the Sphinx staring at you as the moon is moving in on it. When you fight Rico, you're in the middle of some Amazonian forest with like ridiculous pod-looking plants. Oh, I beat Jeddah, the game's over. No, Jeddah's pretty much the Sagat of this game, because then you have to fight your actual true rival. And for Morrigan, it turned out to be Lilith, which makes a lot of sense, because Lilith is her other half that was separated from her.
This was a very fun game if you like monsters, but unfortunately they really did stop at Darkstalkers 3.
There is a demand for more Darkstalkers. We'll see if Capcom does it. We wound up giving this game 3 out of 5, and the reasons is it lacks a storyline. It feels like it's a demo game. You fight like 7 characters and then the game ends. It just feels like it's missing something.
The only reason you can get any story out of this game is if you read the instruction manual, because you're not getting it from the game until you get to Jeddah and he just gives you a typical blah blah and then the fight's on. That being said, we moved on to our number 9 retrospective, which was Capcom versus SNK, and you may be thinking, well, why did you do another crossover? Because this does not play like Marvel versus Capcom 2 has a completely different storyline. This is truthfully just a different game.
Yeah, this was an amazing deal. It's Capcom versus SNK, the 2 biggest rivals on the market. So to mix them together into one game, I think that was amazing. That was like the dream. Like, how is this happening? Well, in 2000 it happened, and we played the arcade version from 2000, and they had this weird tier system. So first you picked what groove. Do you want to play like a Capcom game or do you want to play like an SNK game? And then you get to pick what tier characters do you want. You had weaker characters that are ratio 2, and you can only pick up to 4 ratio altogether. And all the boss characters, of course, are tier 3, which is ratio 3, and then all the weaker but into ratio 1 anyway. And that's the problem I think we have with this game, is like, how do they determine who belongs on what tier in this game?
Yeah, because quite frankly, the tier 1s, even if you picked all 4 tier 1s, you probably are not going to win with them.
So I picked Sagat, and then you had to throw a ratio 1 on it. So I picked Blanca, who I'm pretty decent with. I was owning the whole game with Sagat until I got to Geese, and then he destroyed Sagat, but then Blanca, who's a ratio 1, totally destroyed Geese. So I think it was a more than fun trade back on that. The game is very impressive looking. It feels like an SNK game, but plays like a Capcom game. And all the characters are treated very fairly. It's not like Capcom said, oh, we're only going to make our characters good. No, they made both sides very well. They were all balanced together.
And the most important thing here is this game was truly different than almost all other games in the fact that you had to choose tiers to equal it out to 4. It was a different take. It looked good.
The goal is to either take on Akuma or Geese. The storyline is sort of Ken and Geese are running a competition together to see who's the best, and then pretty much after Geese is beaten, he's like, I am going to throw myself out the window and I'll be back. So it's very weird how they try to combine both franchises. The fun of the game is Capcom versus SNK. That is the fun of the game. They pull off well. The music's very fitting, the locations are very cool, but it will feel like an SNK game with Capcom characters in it.
That's right, and we gave this a 3.5. This game was quite memorable. The point system was absolutely a drawback to this game, but it provided a different style of play, and it was kind of fun.
But again, the follow-up is the one to play. So yeah, we're gonna move on. Game number 10, Street Fighter EX3 for the PlayStation 2, which is of course a follow-up in the Street Fighter EX series, which was on PlayStation and in the arcades. But the third one was exclusive to PlayStation 2, and I picked this one just because, why not? Let's just go to the last one they made and see what they did. And it's a weird game, but it's not a bad game.
Well, the biggest problem with this game is the fact that the replayability is just not there. It wants you to do it so you can unlock all the characters. As we went through the game, you can see we unlocked characters as we went. It was different and it was fun because you took on so many people at once and you felt like a true badass in this game. Challenge was not there. You had more fun at the end seeing how many people you could beat up than you did actually beating the game.
I think the problem is Akira threw in all their own original characters. So like, yes, they have all the original Street Fighters from Street Fighter 2. Every single one's here. Then, oh, we have to fill out the roster. We'll just come up with fun and gimmicky characters like Skullomania and Jack and stuff. It's like, who are all these people we're fighting again? Yes, the characters were just silly and dopey. But the idea was we're in this 3D, yes, we're EX now, we're all extreme. And the graphics are cool, the characters do look great, and the background looks great. But the game is just so generic and lifeless. It's like you go through 7 easy, and it's not hard. Even on hard difficulty, this game is not difficult. And then that's it. It's just so lacking is the problem with this game.
But I mean, they did some things here that was actually very inventive and memorable. And they actually come up with a lot of achievements that you need to do, and you could even recruit people you beat. So whoever the last person you beat, you would bring onto your team, which was really cool. But the problem is, this game is so short. You could probably beat this game 3 times in the span it would take you to beat Street Fighter 2 once.
Right, and we both played it for that exact reason. Like, oh, well, we don't want to just give you a 15-minute video. So I used Sagat, again, my favorite character, and Vespor used M. Bison because he's like, hey, I'm going to have fun with this. I'm going to come up with the storyline that he's the good guy and everyone else is the bad guy. You know, that usual idea of twisting the storyline, and it worked great. It gave us 2 gameplays for the price of 1. So he used Bison, and again, he did not have trouble beating this game. Walking up to them, you do your typical Street Fighter moves, and then they make these loud grunts and, oh, you know, as they faint and they fade away, and then you recruit them. That's the whole game. There's just nothing more to it. It's very graphically intensive. They probably used a lot of space to get all this in, so they can only do so much. And I know I'm making excuses, but you have to remember, it's a PS2 game, which, yes, that is arcade quality, but they ran out of space. I think this is the best they could do with what they had to work with. So what did we wind up giving this?
We gave it a wonderful 3.5 stars because of the originality of this game. It was fun recruiting people and going around beating them up to try to basically save the world if you were a good guy, or doom it to hell if you were a bad guy.
It's impressive what they were able to get out of this game, and I think Akira did a good job. I just think it just wasn't special enough. But EX3 is sort of the forgotten child, and I'm glad we gave it a little respect.
And then we moved on to our retrospective number 11, which was Fighter's History. Never heard of it? Well, this is about as generic as you could ever get in a game series.
Yeah, Capcom got so mad at Data East, and we went to the whole storyline. It's actually a very well-known storyline, so we're not revealing things you guys shouldn't know if you're retro fans. We played the Super Nintendo version just because why not? We love our Super Nintendo. 1994 was pretty much the year that, yeah, Data East was going to be done, because they would last for a few more years, but this game itself pretty much ruined the company. The whole you won the battle but lost the war, that's pretty much what happened here. So long story short, Capcom sued Data East over Fighter History being just a little bit too much of a clone of Street Fighter, and it turned out that somehow, by some miracle, Data East was able to prove that the game was different enough that it's in the vein of fighting games, but it is its own original creation, and the judge went along with it because, again, watch our review, that you can't really copyright the idea of fighting, but you can copyright your own characters, and even though they had similar characters, they were different enough, so whatever. But Data East spent a fortune on defending this game, and yes, they won, but it pretty much killed the company. But the game itself, it's Street Fighter, just not as good. I mean, that's really all I can say. I used Sam Che because I like Sagat, as I've mentioned a few times already. He was the closest to it, and it pretty much is Sagat, just not as tall and not as much fun.
Gee, does Sam Che and Phelan here look like 2 similar Street Fighter 2 characters?
Absolutely, yes, and that was what Capcom was trying to say. The game's not that good, so I don't get why did Capcom go after this. The game is very generic, the moves aren't as fluid, the graphics definitely are not good in this game. It's very, very bare bones. You can see they rushed this to the market, and you can already hear the people at Data East, oh wow, Street Fighter's so popular, we gotta get in on this, what should we do? Well, let's just make our own version of Street Fighter. That's pretty much how the game comes off.
Well, their big difference was on every character there was a weakness. And if you hit this weakness, it would flash. And if you hit this weakness enough, you can knock them off and stun him.
Yeah, they were for real. That was their difference in the game. Besides that, it is a Street Fighter clone. I mean, even the screen afterwards, it looks exactly like something for Street Fighter. The one you beat looking beat up, and it has a message. It's the same thing as Street Fighter. I mean, how different is this?
It's different enough that they won the lawsuit. but lost the war. But because of Data East, folks, say a little prayer for them. They allow us to have many fighting games that are just clones of other fighting games.
That's right. So what's the big catch of this game is that Karnov, of all characters, another Data East famous character, is the big bad in this game. And it's sort of weird because we don't know, is Karnov good or is Karnov bad? Like in some games he's good, some games he's bad. Like he was in Bad Dudes and he's a bad guy. He's in the Karnov games, he's a good guy. He's in this game, we don't know if he's good or bad. He's just another fighter you fight. So I don't know. And that's who you fight in the last battle. You beat up Karnov and then you get a very weak story. And that's why we talked more about the lawsuit than the game itself, because what can you say about Fighter's history except it's a very generic and bad Street Fighter clone, but it's not the worst game ever. It plays well enough that you can do all the moves and everything.
This generic game is truly deserving of the 2.5 star rating out of 5. I cannot think of any other game that is as generic in fighting as this game. It's not a bad blend, as in it's not unplayable, it's not anything standout.
It's actually fun getting back to this, like, oh yeah, that really generic Street Fighter clone. I'm gonna repeat myself, I'm still amazed that they won this lawsuit, and I'm glad they did, believe me. This is Rams saying I'm glad they did, because I don't like that Capcom was bullying them, but it is a Street Fighter clone. You can defend it however you want. This is a Street Fighter clone. There's no other game that is as blatantly a Street Fighter clone as Fighter's history. It is a Street Fighter clone, and it's amazing they won that lawsuit. It really is. Our 12th and final game of our Season 4 retrospective.
The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Fighting Edition.
That's right. Yes, taking place during the 3rd season of Power Rangers. We have Tommy versus Jason. That was the big storyline that we came up with in this anyway, because you get to choose between Thunder Megazord, which is led by Jason, or Mega Tiger Zord, which is led by Tommy.
And when you selected it, the Power Rangers either went to one guy or the other, which was absolutely...
Oh, come on.
It was absolutely hilarious. We came up with a fun backstory for this. The gameplay in this is actually not too bad. It's very simplistic, like most of these fighting clone games of the day and age. It actually had some good stylization to it, and good graphics for what it was on the Super Nintendo.
The controls are very good in this game. I will give them credit. Super moves are easy to do. It's fun. You really feel like you're using either the Tiger Megazord or Thunder Megazord. I picked Mega Tiger Zord because our logo's a tiger. I felt it was fitting. You fight the other Megazord, you fight the generic creatures from the show, and then you fight the bigger battles from the show. And then somehow you're fighting the final boss of the movie, even though that's like supposed to be a separate entity upon itself. But hey, we'll fight Ivan Ooze just because why not? Power Ranger fans are going to love this. You know, this is what fighting games should be. At an airport, beating up Goldar all of a sudden, throwing globes as you avoid sword strikes from Goldar. And it's not a hard game. I think kids can enjoy something like this. And I have to believe a lot of kids did enjoy this. I can imagine that someone 8, 9, 10 years old just having fun, picking up the Super Nintendo and just blamming away, doing all these moves, beating up their favorite characters from the show.
I doubt that the lipstick monster was somebody's favorite monster. But I do like the fact that in all these background settings, that you feel like you're a giant monster or a giant mech. And it was actually kind of funny because they actually had the Ninja Megazord in here, although you couldn't choose it.
Unless you were on a different mode. They really had a lot of cool moments. You're not only just fighting the baddies, you're fighting other Zords for practice mode because you have Zordon's head like sort of judging you in the background. And then they have Serpentera in the Lord Zed battle because you're supposed to be on the moon, which is really cool. You hear the Power Ranger theme going all the while. You hear all this fun stuff. The graphics are actually very good in this. And I know it has a following, believe me, I'm not revealing something that's not known. There are many people who love this game, and you really feel like you are reliving many episodes of Power Rangers while you're doing this.
And the final rating, 3.5 star ratings for what it is, because the theme, it was on the Super Nintendo, and for it being on the Super Nintendo, it actually looks great, has some wonderful Power Ranger music, and it references the show perfectly. It references the movie for some strange reason.
This deserves the 3.5 it got. It's such an underrated yet fun game. Is it the greatest game ever? Absolutely not. Would I play Street Fighter Alpha 3 over this? Of course. But for what this is, I can't deny that I had a lot of fun playing it. It's a short game, though. I think that's another drawback. Only takes about 20 minutes to get through it. But remember, it's targeted to a younger audience, so their attention span won't be as long as other people. Yeah, and that's how we wanted to end our retrospective. That's it. Our Season 4 retrospective is now officially over, as is our Season 4 is about to be over now, too. So very bittersweet, but again, happy that we were able to give you 12 fun 2D fighting games from our retro period. Hopefully you'll appreciate the 12 we came up with. I think it's a very good list. I think the 12 we picked really does cover a fun retro period in fighting history that shows clones of it. It shows different games. It shows what was popular. It showed offshoot games. There's so many that we could have done that are just as popular. This wasn't a popularity contest. This is just let's give a nice taste of what the retro period was like when it came to fighting games. You have a lot of similar games, but it's very cool to see, hey, what else can we do with this similar moveset? And that's pretty much how things turned out in the retro period. And we could have done different games, and maybe we will. Maybe we'll look at 3D fighting games in the future if you guys want. We'll definitely see what we could do with that.
But that being said, we hope you liked our retrospective on 2D fighting games, and we hope that you'll join us for our next season of Retrospective, which will be
16-bit wrestling games. That's right. It was a tough decision, but you know, we had to face facts. You guys love wrestling games. We love wrestling games. We're not going to do it every season, but it's pretty much turning out to be every other season. So we're back to the odd seasons again. It's time for some more wrestling. We found 12, and I think you're really going to enjoy this, so we can't wait to see you.
Well, I'm not going to, because I remember playing these games, and some of these had the worst controls ever. Remember my rant just a moment ago about controls?
Yeah, there's a nice little precursor of what you have to look forward to in Season 5. Till then, don't forget to
like, comment, subscribe, and
ring that bell, and thank you so much for joining us for our Fighting Retrospective for Season 4. It was a blast, and we'll see you all in Season 5. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.